Hey everybody, welcome back. I want to talk today about UFOs and Christian faith and C.S. Lewis. Now, when I was a kid back in the 90s, we had this great TV show, you've probably heard of it, called The X-Files. And The X-Files was a show in which all the urban legends and all the conspiracy theories and all the rumors of paranormal activity all turn out to really be true. And I've got to tell you, lately it feels a little bit like I'm living in the X-Files. I mean, I could name a whole bunch of things, but just consider some of the stuff that's been in the news lately. I mean, have you been following the stuff about the Jerry Epstein revelations, about the guards who were supposed to be guarding him while he took his own life, actually now admit that they were probably asleep and they did fabricate fake evidence to try to cover themselves up? Or maybe you've been following this stuff about the lab leak theory of the coronavirus coming from Wuhan, China, from this lab that maybe our government helped fund. And I do know that right at a year ago, both the Wall Street Journal, both the New York Times and the Washington Post, whenever certain Republican politicians have suggested this lab leak theory, they called it a fringe theory and even suggested that it had already been debunked. And now, a year later, it's like what everybody's talking about. And it's like, wait a second, was that a conspiracy or was that real? And why were you... But the big one is, the big reason I feel like I'm in the X-Files is UFOs. If you have been following the news at all, certainly on the internet, a lot of people are talking about UFOs. And some of the alternative news sources that I follow on YouTube, some of them have been following this story for several years now. And I've been watching it with growing interest. Now, when I was a kid, like I said, we had the X-Files with that great tag, The Truth Is Out There. And I also grew up watching the old Unsolved Mystery shows, and a lot of those were about reported sightings or alleged sightings of UFOs and alien encounters and abductions and all that kind of stuff. And when I was a kid, I really believed in this stuff, and I thought, man, look how big the universe is, there's got to be aliens. And I went so far as to read this book. Yes, I'm embarrassing myself a little bit here, Communion by Whitley Strieber, and you know this is a true story because the subtitle is A True Story, and it even says nonfiction on the spine. So I read this book, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's real, as a 12-year-old. Of course, you grow up, and hopefully your ideas about the world and indeed about God and theology, hopefully they grow with you and become more mature and more thoughtful. And I have to say, I no longer believe this is a true story, but if you're looking for a creepy book to read, maybe while you're having a weekend at the camp or something, it might be fun. But, and it seemed like all this talk about abductions and sightings kind of began to wane as we went in through the 90s into the 2000s, and I've heard people say, how come we don't have more pictures of UFOs? I mean, everybody's walking around with a camera in their pocket now, and we should have all kinds of evidence about this. But it kind of seemed to sort of go away for a while, but now it's back, and it's been back for actually a number of months and even years. But just lately here, we've had, military personnel on 60 Minutes talking about seeing UFOs, or I think they call them UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, seeing them on a very regular basis, hundreds of encounters. And just last month, in May, in mid-May, Barak Obama was on one of those late-night comedy shows, former President Obama, and he was asked about this, and he said, well, yeah, there are videos. We do have evidence of these things, and we don't know what they are, and we cannot explain how they move, and they're flying in ways that we can't, with our technology, duplicate. And he said there is a lot of footage of this, and we don't know what to make of it. Now, I saw that just like yesterday, Barack Obama again was saying he hopes that if we discover that there are space aliens out there, that will bring humanity together and that we'll have a new sense of common ground with one another on this planet. And certainly that's what, in Star Trek, if you watch Star Trek, that's what happened in the future, the fictional future. but I'm wondering, why is Barack Obama saying all this stuff? There is due in June here, and that's why I wanted to get this video in. I've been thinking about this for a while, but I wanted to get it in here at the beginning of June because there is supposed to be a report issued from the Pentagon about they're looking into some of these sightings and things, and hopefully there'll be more conversation about this. But it really feels like strange times. I mean, pandemic on top of everything else, but we live in interesting times, as that old curse says. So what are we to make of all this? I mean, not the Epstein stuff and the media telling people it's a fringe theory that then later turns out to be a mainstream theory. What are we to make of all this UFO stuff? Well, there are a few theories out there that I think, are worth thinking about. Of course, some people say, there's nothing really there. We're talking software glitches, and they're seeing things on radar that aren't really there. But I think now that seems to be not an option because we have visual, people seeing with their eyes what is also showing up on radar at the same time, and FLIR, which is like an infrared scanner, is also seeing it. So you've got multiple sort of lines of evidence converging that there's something there. So what is this? What is this? One of the theories about UFOs back in the 50s and 60s, as there were all these, flying saucer kind of sightings, and it was something people talked about, was that it was a hoax perpetrated by the Pentagon. And it was either perpetrated in order to kind of trick the Soviets, to kind of take their eye off the ball and get them looking to the stars instead of looking at us, as their greatest potential threat, and that it was really a kind of a misinformation campaign, as it were, to sort of confuse and maybe tie up some resources from our adversaries, the Soviets, and that was what it was all about. And it is interesting that as we're kind of seeing this sort of us versus China thing become a little bit more solidified, here it is again, right? UFOs. And it's also another theory, similar theory, was that it was a hoax perpetrated by the Pentagon as a play for more funding and more resources, so they could go to Congress and say, look at all this stuff, this crazy stuff. We need some. It could be a threat, we need some more money coming in. Of course, another theory that is something a lot of people are talking about right now is that we're talking about some kind of drones, earthly technology, terrestrial technology, that somebody is operating, and maybe it's our own military, or maybe it's China, maybe it's Russia, maybe it's, Dr. Evil, or some kind of, what would you say, independent actor with great technological, Elon Musk or somebody with some real resources, has actually put together some kind of a drone that uses some new kind of propulsion technology that we've never seen before. That's why we can't really understand the way it moves or the way it operates, but it actually is a real thing flying around in the sky, and it's being flown probably remotely by some real human beings somewhere on the ground, and that is what we're seeing. So those are some possibilities, or maybe it's them. Maybe it's them. Maybe it's some kind of other civilization entirely from outer space, or perhaps from under the ocean, or from another dimension, or something like that. And it does sound a little crazy when you just talk through it, but it is logically necessary that either we are the only intelligent civilization in the entire universe that is vast beyond comprehension, or we're not. One of those two is the case. And if we're not the only intelligent civilization, then there are other ones. Perhaps, though this is extremely unlikely given the distances involved and the ages of the universe, but perhaps we would even exist at the same time as one of these other civilizations, and perhaps we would even be able somehow to make contact. Certainly, all this coverage about UFOs in not just the alternative and fringe media, but in like mainstream news, it does make you wonder if we're being primed for some kind of huge revelation, perhaps this month or perhaps in the near future, that maybe there is another civilization that we are in contact with, and it kind of boggles your mind. Or perhaps nothing of the sort will happen or could happen if there are no other civilizations. But either way, if it does, so this is going to be a thought experiment. The rest of this video is saying if it turns out that there are other intelligent civilizations and we will have contact with them at some point, what do you make of that? If you are an Orthodox, Bible-believing Christian, if you hold to the classic Christian faith, the faith of the universal church, what are we to make of that? What if there are others out there? Well, lucky for us, God sent in his wisdom, sent us a prophet, a visionary named C.S. Lewis. And C.S. Lewis already thought through this as kind of a thought experiment. I don't even think he had any UFO sightings that he was working with. He just enjoyed reading science fiction and wrote some science fiction. And he kind of said, what if we do encounter another species? He wrote an essay called Religion and Rocketry. And you can find this essay on the internet. I know on YouTube you can listen to someone reading it as a YouTube video that's out there. And he says that he had previously published this essay under the title, Shall We Lose God in Outer Space? And one of the things that he says in the essay is that if we discover that we are actually the only civilization in the universe, and there's never been anyone else, or if we discover that, in fact, there are other civilizations, there are other animal life beyond our planet, other intelligent life beyond our planet, he says either way, skeptics are going to latch onto that and use it as a reason to argue that there is no God or that Christianity makes no sense or cannot possibly be true. He says on the one, and this is interesting, Lewis is thinking through the arguments that his sort of adversaries would be making. He says skeptics would, on the one hand, say, if there are no aliens, there are no other civilizations, it's just us, the skeptics are going to say that just proves that life as we know it is a fluke, and that we are alone in an empty desert, a random universe with no purpose that is hostile to life, and it's far too vast to be created with just us in mind. And so we're just this little accident, we're this little fluke. If we're the only intelligent civilization, that's what people will say, and that is what some people have said and do say. I think Stephen Hawking maybe has said something like that, but I could be wrong. On the other hand, if, says C.S. Lewis, if we discover that there are many worlds and many peoples and many civilizations, then people who are skeptical of the claims of Christianity will say, that just shows you that man is not unique. And the claim of Christianity, that God, who created the vast universe, actually became a human being in the incarnation of God in the person of Jesus Christ, is totally untenable and unbelievable and incredible. This claim is, mere sort of fantasy and wish fulfillment that God would become a man. Maybe it's a projection of our own pride, but it certainly wouldn't make sense. Why would God become one of us when there are all these other civilizations and all these other peoples out there? And as he kind of works through this thought experiment, C.S. Lewis says, but what if we do find other civilizations? As a Christian, how should we evaluate that? If there are alien, intelligent creatures, have they souls? Are they also, in some sense, created to bear the image of God? And if they are rational beings with souls created in the image of God, are they, like us, fallen? Are they sinful? Are they also held in the grips of the power of original sin? Or are they innocent in a way that we as a species are not? And if they are fallen, has God provided a means of redemption for them? Has God provided some means of grace through their own civilization? Or is it the case that God intends for us to bring the gospel to them? Or if they're innocent, if they're not fallen, then what on earth would be the consequences of us, a fallen species, making contact with them? C.S. Lewis plays with this idea in this essay, but also in his sci-fi trilogy, the Space Trilogy, this idea that our planet is basically under quarantine. And he says in this essay, I've wondered sometimes if the vast distances between us and any potential other civilizations are really for their protection, and that we are under quarantine because of our fallen, sinful nature. We certainly do know what our species, our race does to others. The ambassadors to other worlds could very well turn out to be the next conquistadors, or at least attempt to be. I don't know that we would have the technology to actually harm them, but maybe we would trigger a war or some terrible cataclysm for ourselves in the attempt. And C.S. Lewis says, probably we would send missionaries to, if they were a fallen species, we would send missionaries to them. But, it has often happened that missionaries have done great harm as well as great good. And that could be something that happens again. So what would happen? What would happen if we had contact with another species? He says in order to be prepared for that potentiality, that possibility, we should certainly be firm against every form of exploitation in the here and now. We as Christians should be people who fight against all forms of exploitation, so that when we're presented with new opportunities for exploitation, we'll be the people on the forefront saying we have to be careful. We have to be charitable. We have to be certain that we're not exploiting this new species if there was even a possibility that we could do so. But I think it's likely that if they're coming here from somewhere else, they're so far superior to us, technologically speaking, that we would not be able to exploit them. And if they were fallen, like us, they may well exploit us, which raises all kinds of nightmarish scenarios that have been thoroughly explored in a number of sci-fi movies and books. So that's one possibility. But certainly as Christians, we need to remember what we read in our Bible in Romans chapter 8. It talks about the whole creation being groaning because of sin, but God's aim, God's mission, God's purpose in sending Jesus, in sending the Holy Spirit, and raising up the church to be the ambassadors of reconciliation. God's purpose in all of this is to bring the whole cosmos, the whole creation, back into harmony. Harmony with God, overcoming the brokenness caused by sin and the guilt caused by sin, and harmony with the other elements of creation, with creatures in harmony with one another. That is God's purpose. And that would still be God's purpose if we discovered that there were other civilizations and other creatures. And so it's important to kind of keep that in mind as we think about what would we do, what should we do, what could we do if we found that there were other civilizations and other species out there. So that's some initial thoughts. As always, C.S. Lewis is got this amazing probing mind that he is a gift that God has given to the contemporary church, because even though he's writing in the 40s and 50s, so much of what he says, or at least some of the questions he asks or the ways he thinks through them, are still so relevant and will continue to be. So if nothing else, I hope that this video will get you to go read C.S. Lewis, go read that essay, go think through some of the stuff he says. And the final thing that he says that I did want to mention is, every time there's a new discovery, every time there's a leap in human understanding, and this was true when, Columbus discovered the New World, it was true when the theory of evolution really began to gain acceptance in the scientific community, there are a lot of people who will say this new discovery, this new theory, this destroys Christianity, and this makes the claims of the faith untenable. When they discovered that actually the earth goes around the sun and not the other way around, there were people who said, oh no, and there were also people who said, oh good, this destroys Christianity. But Lewis points out every time there's some new leap in understanding, when the real theologians, not the reactionary fundamentalists, but the real theologians have a chance to think through it. And the real scientists who are not themselves bringing a sort of anti-Christian bias to the discussion just try to, as best they may, objectively work through it, we typically end up kind of back where we started. And that there are certain questions that Christianity holds out answers to that cannot be either answered or dismissed from any other source of knowledge. And so we're still kind of back where we started, but at a sort of more sophisticated level, perhaps, in our knowledge of the world. And I think that would be true if we did discover that there was life, intelligent life, civilizations beyond our own planet, beyond our own solar system. And we will just see what is in store for us, whether it's, not much of anything at all, or whether we're going to find ourselves, God forbid, living through that movie Independence Day pretty soon. But in any case, God is not taken by surprise by anything, and he remains our hope and our salvation. So I hope you will check out that C.S. Lewis essay on religion and rocketry, and just read C.S. Lewis in general, and you'll find some great thought experiments in there that hopefully help you deepen your faith and your understanding and your confidence as a Christian, that actually, as we think through these things, we don't need to be kind of hair on fire or like worried about whatever the new discovery will be, because it may in fact be that the new discovery doesn't really change anything in terms of how we think about the truths of our faith, or it may be that it gives us a deeper understanding and appreciation of the truths of our faith. So anyway, I'm going to leave this one there, and we'll see what the Pentagon report says this month, and just y'all can put bets or something, or what do you think in the comments? Are they going to say, actually, yes, we do have alien bodies and all the rest of it? I kind of doubt that. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. Until we connect again, I pray that the Lord will bless you and keep you. Amen.